My program at UC Davis is fundamentally multidisciplinary, as you just heard. We are in the entomology department, but we are fundamentally trying to focus on technologies. It's not so much the bugs, it's more upfront. How can we use different technologies to make the crop production as economically viable and as environmentally sustainable as we possibly can? And in the process, can we make agriculture sexy? Can we entice young, smart people to consider agriculture as a path for their future? Can they find ways to see meaningful ways of including their aspirations, their interest into something that has to do with crop production? And we absolutely think we can. We can offer them opportunities to do things that many of the students, when they first come to our lab, don't even thought had anything to do with crop production. So we're very happy about that. And I'm going to be talking about this top left rectangle here, the colplasma. So we will get to that here in a second. But I want to start, I'm going to sort of take take you on a little bit of a journey here, and we're going to go through some different aspects. And the first thing I want to point out, and of course it's not entirely true. There is some deterministic process going on here, but to some extent the pest outbreaks are non-random. And why I think this is important to mention is because it means that if it's non-random, it's like it's not some higher powers that are deciding whether we're going to have an outbreak or not of whatever pest. And when I say pest, I mean diseases, I mean insects, I mean nematodes, bacteria, whatever, even rodents, whatever. It's broadly defined. If it's non-random that these organisms appear in our crop, it means that there is some sort of pattern behind it. And it is our duty, us working in pest management, what we are fundamentally doing is we are trying to figure out what that pattern is. What are the driving variables? What can we do to minimize the risk? What can we do in our operational practices that is practically feasible, economically viable in ways so that we can prevent pest outbreaks in the first place? So this is very, very much like the philosophy of preventive medicine, which we apply to ourselves, to our children, to our loved ones, where it's about getting enough sleep and staying away from all that wine and all that alcohol to some extent, at least, and other drugs and whatnot. It's as enjoyable as it is. It has to be enjoyed modestly. Getting the exercise. We know all the factors that are responsible for the quality of our life and for that are risk factors associated with our own health. We are fundamentally in my lab, we are fundamentally taking that approach of preventive medicine and applying it to the world of crop production. We are trying to figure out ways we can be as upfront and as early as possible, detect it, but even before that, figure ways that we can prevent outbreaks to occur in the first place, and how we can detect the needs of the plants as early as possible. And of course, when we talk about vineyards, so because of this great opportunity to be with you today, I had to read up a little bit on vineyards, and of course that non-randomness applies to diseases in vineyards. And I would be a fool if I started preaching this, because you know this way better than I do, but just to remind people more generally that humidity and leaf wetness, of course, is an issue. The extremes of heat are other abiotic factors that are incredibly relevant to whether we're going to face disease outbreaks in a vineyard. The irrigation and the logging, the drainage, the compactness of our soil, the density of our canopies, these are all factors that you are aware of, that you are dealing with on a daily basis, that you are investing in minimizing the consequences of as part of your management practices. And these cannot be looked at in isolation, and then pest management as something over here that is dealt with by another team, and the two teams are not talking with one another. Of course, there has to be a lot of communication. There has to be a lot of exchange. There has to be a lot of record keeping, mapping out, and through that process, even though this may not be considered IPM per se, integrated pest management, I strongly believe it, and that's something that I'm teaching in the courses that I provide at UC Davis, is communication and being able to have a communication flow within your entity, whether it's an almond orchard or a vineyard. It doesn't really matter. The different teams, the irrigation team, the pruning team, the fertilizer, well, that's probably fumigation, but all the different teams that are involved in the management, they need to speak with one another to optimize the overall management practices and therefore reduce the risk of pest outbreaks. So these are all factors that affect the performance of your crop, but also and as part of that, of course, the pest management. Now, where I really want to take this, where this journey is sort of leading towards, has to do specifically with the fertilization. So, what would be concerns you have about too much or too little fertilizer, nitrogen fertilizer in particular? What would be your concerns, other than wasting money, of course, on too much?
Plant stress on the too little side, and creating too much vegetation on the top end.
Right, exactly. Definitely. Well, we can have very excessive growth, which again can condense the canopy, right? And therefore we can have less airflow, and then suddenly we get the humidity, and then we get the conditions that are favorable to different diseases. So that's definitely also thinner leaves and larger leaves, more roots, more lateral roots. I'm not exactly sure why that is a problem, but that seems to be something. And that will can dramatically increase the risk of some of the key players that you guys are facing on a seasonal basis. But we can also, through the nitrogen deficiency, if we're not applying too much, we can have a problem. Maybe not directly linked to particular diseases, but if the yield is lower, if the overall stress of the plant is higher, then it's just like ourselves. We get more susceptible. Our immune system, our inducible defense systems are not as effective. So clearly, too little nitrogen is a problem. And there's a particular reason why I'm focusing on nitrogen, because that is sort of the essence of this talk, which will get us towards the plasma activated water that I am eager to share with you some information about. But before we go there, of course, it's important for us to remember that plants, generally speaking, can take up nitrogen in two forms, either as ammonium or as nitrate. What people are probably not so aware of is how, kind of like in the previous talk about pesticides, which is also something I spent a lot of time talking about, not going to talk about so much today, but what we typically can run into is that we apply way too much. So we have an excessive application rate in terms of frequency of applications, and also the performance of the applications that we are applying is maybe not where we want it to be. With regards to fertilizer, the real problem is that a lot of it can actually just dissipate into the air. So these percentages are rather staggering, right? So kind of like when in the previous talk, when there was a little bit of discussion about adjuvants and how adjuvants can be used to maximize the performance of a pesticide, we can also think about, it's not just about applying the right amount of nitrogen fertilizer or NPK in general. It's also making sure that fertilizer ends up in a way that the plants can uptake it and that it doesn't volatilize, that it doesn't dissipate. So how do we get it into the soil? How do we apply it in a way that makes it accessible to the plants at the time when they're able to take it up? That is absolutely key, because otherwise we're just throwing money away. Okay, and we may be thinking that we don't have a deficiency issue because we applied what we were supposed to, but according to these statistics that I'm finding, and you're welcome to check it out yourself, if we don't have good soil structure, if we apply it in the wrong way there are multiple ways that the nitrogen that we are applying may actually not end up where we think it's going to be. And that becomes a deficiency problem. And that should be a big concern for you guys who are in the business of making money. This is complete waste. In addition to all the environmental consequences that this has, this is clear indication of how money is being wasted. So if we sort of summarize it all up here, somewhere between 15 and 50% of the applied nitrogen, generally speaking, may actually not end up where it needs to be in the crop. So how can you, as growers, how can you minimize this percentage? That should be a key here. And nitrogen budget in crop production should be something that really should be a top priority, and figuring out, measuring how much you're actually losing and how this can be potentially. Talk with the crop physiologists and the soil physicists and the agronomists who know about all of this, and try to figure out ways that we can be more judicious about our fertilizer applications, so that is not ending up in the atmosphere. When I talk about plasma activated water, and again, I'm in the entomology department, and I will give you, you can probably imagine how many entomology research teams at any university in the world that works both with drones and LEDs and plasma activated water. Not a whole lot. Probably we are the only ones on the planet. So we're a little bit different in my lab, but that's again because we fundamentally are interested in the technologies that can make pivotal changes, that can be disruptive in terms of how agriculture is going to be perceived in the future, how we can fundamentally address some of the challenges that growers are facing, and how we can grow crops in new and smarter ways. So we are completely comfortable being in spaces and work with technologies that we have absolutely zero training in, but we can always find people, and the internet is a great thing, so we can find a lot of information. So what you are looking at right here is our plasma activated water system. So it's a very high powered jet that at the very tip produces an extraordinarily high electric charge. So it does take a lot of energy. So this technology is not sustainable if you burn fossil fuel to generate that electricity. But if you have solar panels or wind power, which a lot of places have nowadays, and it's growing, that's not a problem. So under the assumption of electricity costs being reasonable, the technology, this technology becoming better and better, we generate an extremely high charge there at the tip. And then what happens with that energy is that it interacts with in this case, the atmosphere. So the air, the atmosphere. And we all know that the biggest composition, the biggest component of atmospheric air is nitrogen. It's two nitrogen molecules tied together. And we have O2, and we have some CO2, and we have some other components. But 78% of that atmosphere is nitrogen. So it's ironic that we have all this enormous amount of nitrogen right around us. We're breathing it. We can touch it. It's right here. We just need to make it accessible to the plants. And that's where this system comes in. So when the electric charge is generated, it has so much power that it pulls the atoms apart. And then they become extremely reactive and start binding together in different chemical forms. The pH just precipitates, the conductivity. This list of characteristics of the water is just some part of what is happening. So a lot of these different characteristics of the water are completely changed based on how long we treat the water for. If we only treat it for 30 seconds and it's 10 gallons or 5 gallons or something, it's of course a different matter. Here in this case, we're just treating about half a liter or a liter. But within minutes we can have a difference. And there are commercial systems out there that will treat hundreds of gallons in very short periods of time. So this technology is not just something you can find on a lab bench in Davis. You can find it. There are real companies producing these technologies. So the question then is, when you do this, when you treat this water, you activate it with plasma, what then happens? And why am I talking about that to you today? And that's kind of where we're going to go. So remember again, it is the charge is breaking the ends apart, and the O's are also being broken apart. And then you push it into water. So you have H2O, you have O and O, and you have N and N. So suddenly you get all these, what is referred to as nitrogen species, and you have also oxygen species. So you have something like hydrogen peroxide being generated, and you have NO3, nitrate, which is what you saw on one of the previous slides, is one of the forms of nitrogen that plants can take up. So, oh, wait a minute. Suddenly we are ourselves producing our own nitrogen fertilizer. And that's pretty powerful. That is something that is extremely empowering throughout the world, because there's like 4 countries that are basically almost dominating / monopolizing the fossil fuel driven synthetic fertilizer market. Well, maybe that could be broken. Maybe that could be decentralized. Maybe growers could go together in different parts. Maybe not so much here in California and elsewhere, but definitely in less affluent parts of the world where fertilizer is a hugely important and limiting resource. Maybe they have a lot of sunlight. Maybe some of the poor countries in sub-Saharan or in Saharan Africa could actually start having solar panels and also get some water in, desalinated water coming in, and then they could produce plasma activated water and make a fortune out of that. How cool would that be? So this is really something that we think can change the world. We hope. We are very interested in promoting the companies that are working on this and trying to figure out how we can make this technology even more adoptable, make it practically feasible, make it more economically viable, having the companies involved that either sell the product, sell the systems, or maybe even companies that produce the plasma activated water and sell it directly to growers in different forms. So we are working on all sorts of aspects, and you can see this has, maybe you will argue, nothing to do with entomology or pest management, but it actually has everything to do with it, because again, our focus is on pest management and on prevention. So if we can make the crop more healthy, and we can minimize the risks of outbreaks, especially under the assumption of these outbreaks being non-random. So hence the introduction that I was giving you earlier. So what does it do? Well, it generates fertilizer, which is kind of cool. And magically also, this may not be relevant to you because you are not using seeds, but we are working with the horticultural industry, the ornamental crops, and we are seeing faster germination of seeds. So that means that people producing seed crops from seed can get them faster out of greenhouses. So we're very interested in working with the tomato transplant industry, because they heat their greenhouses early in the season to get the transplants ready for planting in March, April, May, June. And early in the season, it can be very cold. So they have to spend a ton of fuel on heating up these greenhouses. Well, if they could produce them faster, they could start later, and they may not have to spend so much money on fuel, which is something we are all interested in. They would save money, and this would become more environmentally friendly. So this is all, and shorter period of time in the greenhouse also means less exposure to thrips and whiteflies and spider mites and all this. So they can maybe reduce the need for pest management, and maybe even get the crop grown in a time frame that is shorter than the life cycle of the pest. So everybody wins here. So there's a lot of ways that this can be used. So the fact that the plants grow faster is and have more uniform germination and growth is something that is extremely important also in when the production of crops gets roboticized. It's very important that the crops have a uniform stand if you're using trays, so the robot can pick up the individual plugs more readily. So there's a lot of reasons why this is kind of cool and something that can help in a number of ways. We are also, and I'll share some data with you about that. We are also looking at how it can both directly and indirectly be used in pest management. And just to sort of, it's a little nerdy exercise that I thought would be interesting. So to set this all in perspective, because a lot of times people are thinking about sustainability of technologies and whatnot. So looking up and finding data on how much nitrogen fertilizer is being used on a yearly basis in crop production, we're talking about 106 million metric tons. So this sounds like, whoa, Christian, where is all this going to come from? I mean, that's a lot of fertilizer. It is. But here's what's funny. The Earth's atmosphere, I have no idea how they figured this out, but somebody did the math on this. So the atmosphere, just for the heck of it, if we took the entire atmosphere, there's actually 4,000 trillion metric tons of nitrogen in that. Now, this N2 is all potentially accessible with our plasma activated water. So if we were to turn this into fertilizer, we would have 38 billion years of fertilizer, which I think that's a rather sustainable. I mean, I'm not worried about us running out of atmosphere anytime soon. This is of course a joke, but it speaks to, and maybe if we were to go really crazy and do this a lot, maybe there would be some effects down the road. But I think it's fair to say that a lot of nitrogen could be pulled out of the atmosphere before we would see any consequences of that. So even from an environmental standpoint, this seems to be a rather interesting, intriguing approach, especially if more and more people just use it, kind of like with the windmills. The technology gets better, cheaper, more efficient. We get the infrastructure in place. We get the people trained in using it. So it's really becomes something that could make a difference on both locally, but also globally. So in my team, we have, I'm just highlighting some of the team members that are part of part of the team working on this. So I have some graduate students. I have a postdoc, Patrice, Yugong, and Pamela are graduate students, and two of my technicians, Anil and Halle. So when I speak today, I am definitely speaking on behalf of this team. A lot of this stuff that I'm talking about has been published, not all of it, so you're getting access to some preliminary data. But this is a big effort, and I'm leading a number of larger federal grants. And we are working with Minnesota and Cornell and UC A&R, and we have people with capabilities in all sorts of aspects of this. And so it's a big team that is evolving, and we are becoming kind of a resource on this use of plasma activated water in sustainable crop production. Towards the end, I will show you a link to our website and some of the resources that we have made available to the public. And we also hold on a regular basis some seminars, some summit. We call them summits, and where we do sort of virtual presentations. We invite companies in and others. And if that's something you're interested in, please look me up and send me an email, and we will put you on the mailing list, and you will be invited to the next summit. And you can find YouTube videos on some of the previous summits that we have held. So I just told you that plasma activated water, PAW, is very reactive. Once you take those atoms and you break the covalent bonds, they become, well, they become very reactive. That's a good thing on one hand, but it also means that it can be a curse to some extent, because the compounds that are being generated are very unstable. And that's something that when we started out, we were not aware of. But we are learning more and more about this. I have not pointed this out before, but I probably should, that plasma activated water is not a new thing. It's been around for a long time. And it's been used quite widely and also the plasma itself, not blowing it into water, but the cold plasma, cooling it down, and then using it as a surface sterilant in the electronics industry, in the food industry, in the medical industry. It's basically a sterilant precisely because all those reactive species are so reactive that then they will bind to whatever membranes and organic surfaces and basically tear them apart. So it's a way to control pathogens, and that's of course where I'm gonna take this. That's where if you are still awake at that time, we will get there, and you will hopefully understand that this is something that also from a pest management standpoint and from a disease management standpoint has a lot of potential. But what we need a product that is somewhat stable, because otherwise if we generate this plasma activated water and then 2 days later or 3 days later it's a different product, that's not something that is commercially viable. So Yu Gong, my master's student, is doing a really cool and very comprehensive study on looking at the stability over time. And we are basically setting up a whole bunch of experiments where we're using different containers because we think that the material may actually interact with the water itself. We are looking at whether we have them open, so whether there is a access to the atmosphere or whether they are closed, they're sealed, and there's no headspace within the bottles. And then we're running all sorts of diagnostics, many of those diagnostics that I showed you on that list on a previous slide. And then we're looking at how it changes over time and how we can create something that has as high nitrogen content as possible, nitrate content as possible, and also as stable as possible. And I should point out that, of course, you can think of well, what about minerals? What about sodium? What about chlorine? What about these other? Well, those minerals are not in the air, right? So they are not volatile. So their concentration is not going to change, but it's particularly what is in the gaseous phase that will interact and will change the composition of the air. So here are some graphs. So this is, and I'm showing this without addition of a base, and I will explain that here on the next slide. But what you can basically see is that the ones that are closed hold the nitrate content a lot better than the ones that are open. So we are definitely recommending that if you get hold of some plasma activated water, what's in the bottle, you should use it, and then but don't use half of it and then a week later use the other half. This is about getting it used, provided that it doesn't have a base, because we then had this thought that, is there a way we could stabilize this by using bases? So now we're getting into an area where we are even on, and pun intended, we are on deeper water here. We are now getting into water chemistry and basic inorganic chemistry, where we started thinking about what if we started, and may remember that I said earlier that the pH shows a sharp drop right after we start treating. So it's sort of an exponential curve where within minutes we see a drop all the way down to 2 or 3. So it gets very, very acidic. Well, when we add some potassium hydroxide, which we chose as the base for a couple of reasons. First of all, it's rather cheap, it's very readily available, and it's got that K in there, right? We want that potassium. So if we could use that as a way to stabilize our PAW, and if we have the N, now we also have the K. So that was something we thought about. And guess what? We see this curve now, it's suddenly leveling off beautifully. So we are following this and doing it over longer periods of time now, actually following it for weeks, and even have some samples we're going to keep for a year to see how stable it is. But this is part of the exercise. This is part of our commitment to being relevant, being applied, and really trying to address the questions that growers might have, and try to help the companies also find the solutions to what can make this product something that growers may adopt in the future. And we looked at different concentrations of potassium hydroxide, and we have sort of figured out that we think that somewhere in the, so we now have a ppm level that we are comfortable with, and that is sort of what we're going with. But this is still, there's a lot of tweaking here. The initial quality of the water has a huge impact on where you end up on this scale. So it's not just water, is not just water. And if you're using well water, of course, the hardiness, all the different characteristics of the water itself from start are going to influence where you land up. But this is something we need as a community to get better and better handle on. And this is just to show you a little cartoon of why I am kind of excited about this. So the little tomato plant, these were planted at the same time. They were all grown in the same space. And you can see within a couple of weeks that so when we say PAW 1 and 2, this is because we can treat the PAW for different treatment times. So you can see that there's a difference here. So it matters. So that it's not PAW is not one thing. It's a number of it depends on what the original quality of the water was, whether you added base after, all these characteristics of it. But you can basically see that there's a difference in their speed of growth, and that's exactly what we are extremely excited about. And if we go a little bit, so these are tomato plants. Well, if we go a little bit further, so these are taken a couple of weeks, they're probably two months old or something. So you can see the tomato plants, same variety, same greenhouse, irrigated the same way. They were fertilized. So the one to the left was definitely under fertilized. You can see that's even a little bit of yellow, but you can also see the one to the right is a completely different plant. So this kind of shows you the impact of what some supplementary irrigation with PAW is. And it is not just the nitrogen. I say that with some degree of confidence. What exactly is going on? Well, we are only scratching the surface on this. There is definitely a lot of research to be done, but many of those characteristics of the water are very likely interacting with phytohormones, so that hydrogen peroxide is probably triggering some hormonal responses. There are clear indications of, people have looked at this, that the root structure is altered. So lots of things are happening, and at the molecular or the physiological level, we don't know yet, but the body of research on this is growing rather quickly. So if you have some time when you're done eating Christmas food wherever you are, you might want to do some Google searching on plasma activated water and then vineyards or plant growth or whatever. And I'm just going to share some references, some review articles that you can start with. because this is kind of exciting, and there's a lot of people looking at this and realizing this is snake oil at this point in time. I will say, but it's the good stuff. It is doing some very remarkable things. So here are some tomato plants. Well, strawberry respond the same way. Okay. So same as we just saw. Even marigold, some of the ornamental plants, we're seeing more flowers, we're seeing bigger plants, we're seeing stronger plants. So again, we are boosting that inducible defense, these inducible defense mechanisms, and we are also, and this is again, may or may not be relevant to you guys in the vineyard industry, but many of these plants are particularly susceptible when they are small. So the very tiny seedlings are the most susceptible. Well, if we can get them out of that window of susceptibility quicker, we can actually help the growers a lot. A great example on that is the tomato transplants, where they are very susceptible early on to beet curly top virus transmitted by the beet leafhopper, and that's something we have worked on in the past. But if the tomato plants gets infected with beet curly top virus later in the season, it's actually not a problem. The plant can tolerate it. So it's just about so the real concern is if they plant late, and so the plants are small when the migration or when the leafhoppers hit them. So can you grow them faster, get them out of that early susceptibility stage is a huge priority. This is a big field trial we've done for a couple of years, and this year we had an absolute slam dunk result. We were out hand picking tons of tomatoes. This team that I just showed you, we were all out there. And this is data from a replicated study with 6 replicated plots, 12 treatments, and there were some PAW treatments. And so the first thing I want to say, which I'm very proud of as a foreigner and as a non-tomato grower, we got about 3 kilos per plant, which is right in the area of what a commercial grower would be. So this is not one of these research trials where they got like a fraction of what the commercial growers did get. No. We got commercial yields here. We got absolutely. And this was also with 80%. So we reduced the fertilizer level and we could dramatically increase the yields. So think about this for a second. So the seedlings, this was when the tomato transplants were treated as seedlings and transplants. Once they got out in the field, all the different plots were getting the same amount of fertilizer. But then, so the effect of the PAW was retained throughout the process. So this is where I think there might actually be an interest for you guys. I'm not expecting it to last for 60 years or how long you keep an individual wine plant, but there could be some effect that is carried over. And if you on a regular basis provided some PAW and I don't know how much a plant would need or how often, this is something that would have to be worked out. But it just shows you this is a first. We haven't published this, so we're very, very excited about this because this basically shows that we can have we can retain the effect. So whatever happened to this root structure, whatever happened to those plants, that kept throughout the entire growing season in Davis. So quite impressive. And now we're getting into pest management here. I'm running out of time, but that's fine. We have done some work. So my postdoc Patrice is a very accomplished mite specialist, and we've done some work where we have irrigated different tomato plants with and without PAW, and we can basically see here the curve to the right. You can see that the development over time, we infested them experimentally with 30 mites, and you can see that the intrinsic growth is much faster on the control plants. So for whatever reason, well, we actually know that. We feel we have a very good handle on what happens, but they're growing much slower. And that is huge because that means that we may actually be able to slow them so much down that they never really become an issue. So then spraying wouldn't be a need in the first place. Secondly, if we're using natural enemies, there's a much higher probability of them performing well if the intrinsic rate of increase of the reproductive rate of the spider mites is much lower, then they can keep up essentially. And I will show you some data here afterwards also on predatory mites that actually shows that the predatory mites perform better on PAW treated plants. So we are getting a lot of additional effects, and that has not been published either, but this has been published. We are seeing with thrips that when we give them a choice between a PAW treated plant and a control plant, so if we put them if we put the leaves into a tube and let them go left or right, they don't like it. You can see that the percentages on the PAW treated plants are much lower than on the control plants. So there's something about them. We think this has to do with trichome density, which we have studied, and there's also something about the element composition of the plants. Now, trichomes, both the glandular and the non-glandular, significantly increase in density on PAW treated plants. And thrips may not be a big problem for you, but there are definitely other piercing sucking insects that are a huge problem for you. And it would be very interesting to see what PAW would do to some of your wine varieties, especially the ones that have trichomes. I don't know about trichomes on wine varieties, but I'm assuming that some of them have the potential of producing trichomes. So this may be a way to overcome Pierce's disease or reduce the risk of Pierce's disease or something. So keep that in mind as a potential project we might be able to do together if you're interested. Now, here's that study that I was talking about with the predatory mites. So you can see if we do nothing, we can basically look at how many eggs they consume, and you can basically see that the predatory mites consume more eggs. They eat more of the spider mites when the plants have been treated with PAW. So this is a very indirect effect of the PAW. That involves trichomes, and then the why. But again, why that is happening, we don't know. But this is something we are very interested in continuing to learn more about. But the first thing is just look at this. I mean, something is happening, and this is interesting. And would that make it possible if something like this could be translated into vineyards? Would it then be possible for you guys to consider more people to adopt use of biological control agents and therefore use less pesticides? That's where the sort of the integration of this really makes sense. That right now you may not be willing to go the organic or the biological control route because it's not working. Well, what if we could make it work by integrating PAW into the mix here? So this is probably why you are here today. And I just pulled one. There are several. You can go here and there's a DOI. You can look up this list. So I'm sure that Christina is going to share these slides or something. It's going to be available to you. But you can basically find, so this is a review article, and I just pulled out a couple of statements from the abstract, and then you can read it yourself. So non-thermal atmospheric pressure plasma, so this is basically the cold plasma that I've been talking about all along, has demonstrated its potential as an alternative tool for the efficient and environmentally safe control of plant pathogenic microorganisms in many studies, right? Boom. Efficient inactivation of phytopathogenic bacterial and fungal cells by various plasma sources under laboratory conditions has been frequently reported. So it is not just Christian Nansen who is pulling this out of his sleeve or somewhere else. On the backside, this is actually happening, and people are consistently seeing this as something that is having rather promising. Of course, it's not perfect. It's not working it's not magic. And there are lots of problems with it, but it is not. It's definitely something that needs to be looked into very carefully, I would argue. Plasma treated water shows antimicrobial activity. This has to do with that hydrogen peroxide that is being produced, and we all know that one of the products that we can use to clean wounds with is hydrogen peroxide. Well, that's being generated right here. And of course, we can also kill plants. I forgot to mention that little detail. Rather important. If we make PAW too strong, well, guess what? We are going to kill the plant with it, right? So we need to fine tune where is the sweet spot where it's not costing us too much money, too much energy to produce, and it's also having all the positive benefits and as few of the negative effects as we can possibly have. So, right, it's even being used now in plasma vaccination of plants. So you can see there's a lot of prospects, a lot of innovative technology reasons why this should be considered. And in the process, just to show you a little bit about what we are also doing in my lab. So because we're working with plasma activated water, and because we want to treat transplants and we want to do that instead of pipetting it, my technician has developed this robot to do that automatically. So this is something we are working on, especially for the tomato transplant industry. We have developed robotic spraying. So this could be, so these are actually lettuce plants right there. So this is me running and simulating a tractor application. Well, if you guys want to do something with simulated tractor applications, I know you're using air blast, but we could probably set it up in a way that it would be relevant to you. This is something we can do. We just published this. So this is basically talking about how this technology aligns with some of the United Nations Sustainability Development Goals and how it empowers growers to look for new and more sustainable sources of nitrogen fertilizer. Some of that research about the spider mites, Patrice has published on that, so you can find more information about that if you're interested. We have a website, so this code may not work either if we're having problems with that, but if the slides are shared, you can definitely go there. You can find links to meetings and summits and our newsletters and some of the publications. And I just wanted to put this in here. This is kind of clunky, but just to let you know, kind of like the talk we had about adjuvants earlier, that for PAW, plasma activated water, falls sort of in between water treatment, fertilizer, biostimulant, pesticide, but when I asked ChatGPT, this is what I got. I got that there are no cases within the last 5-10 years that have shown that DPR or CDFA or any others have made any cases against growers who have used PAW. So it should be safe, but we also need, if you have strong lobbyists, we need clarity on this. We need, for export markets and others, we need the politicians to get behind this and provide the framework so that you can safely and effectively use this technology. And with that, I just want to thank the resources, the funding bodies that are helping us. I'm very eager to talk with any combination of you later on about what we might be able to do in vineyards about some of this stuff. So with that, thank you, and I will take any questions.
All right. Thank you so much, Christian. That was super fascinating and exciting. I think
Good.
lots of questions here. And first one is from Patrick Riggs, as is the second one. Could a PAW system work in wine grape nursery context? Seems like it could.
I think that's the. I mean, when you're out in row crops or big acreage, it's going to be hard to get the amounts there. But I know nothing about the vineyard industry, so I apologize for that. So if there's a nursery, absolutely, that is where you have that high concentration of plants. If you are using overhead irrigation or drip, even better, they would be even better. We can absolutely do this. We work with some of the biggest, the Altman Farm and Plug Connections, and some of the biggest producers of transplants and seedlings and plugs, and they're very excited about this. So I mean, it's a we should absolutely be working with you guys. Yes. So the hard yes.
Okay, and then the next question, we might have covered some of this during the course of your presentation, but also from Patrick. I would assume in a practical sense, you would treat at the well or mixing loading site, turn the plasma machine on, treat the water slash fill tank, turn off plasma machine, go spray and repeat, something like this.
So the systems that are commercially available are, from what I gather, are similar to a fertilizer tank, right? So think of how you connect your irrigation, your fertilizer tanks to your fertilizer to your irrigation system. It would be kind of the same thing, if provided that you have the resources to buy your own system. Now, some growers may or may not want that. So there, I can also see a future where companies would actually provide some very high concentrated PAW, bring it to you, and then it could be diluted. That they're not putting 100%. The PAW that is being generated may not need what needs to go into the irrigation line. So, but this is where the market studies need to be done.
Okay. The next question here from Jake Newstad. Have you run nutrient analysis on the PAW treated plants versus control?
Run analysis of what?
A nutrient
Right,
analysis?
we have done that. Yeah.
NPK.
So we are actually, Yugong is the student that's working on stability. He's working on spinach, because that's something where we can actually, where you harvest the leaves. With the tomato, we looked a little bit into the tomato. We are not thinking that from the little we know at this point about tomatoes is there's not so much, the nutritional composition is not changing as much. But with something like grapes, where it's super important for you to have a nutritional effect, the sweetness and maybe the skin thickness and other characteristics. Again, I know nothing about this. Let's have a go. Let's see what we could come up with. It's something that needs to be tested for sure.
Okay. The next question is from Jonathan Petrov. Is the two-choice assay scored based on the thrips first choice?
It's actually probing event. So it's how many times they insert their mouth parts, and we are also counting where they lay their eggs. So we're giving them a window of time, and then see how many times they probe, and also where they laid their eggs, and kind of like the preference performance hypothesis that females should prefer the host on which their offspring has the highest performance. That's also called mother knows best. Is sort of the ecological paradigm that we're working on there. And there we've also did it with the spider mites, and they don't like those plants. If they're given a choice, no. So it's very interesting. And I mean, how the sharpshooters would do, and how these other pests that you're dealing with, how it would affect them, who knows?
Thank you. Next question is from Stephanie Kunkel. You seem to be using robotics for spray application. What are the potential hazards of plasma water for human applicators?
So that is a good question, and that's something that needs to be studied. We are not, I mean, everything is relative, right? Normal water will kill you if you drink too much of it. So, and that's of course a cheesy answer. I'm not disrespecting the question is very valid. But we also know, like we heard from the previous talk from Julius, that pesticides they're deadly. And so there's a relative, we are on a scale here. And we have actually seen that we can, if we use PAW, and I didn't show slides of that, maybe I should have, but if we use PAW as the carrier of pesticides, we have looked at some of the organically certified, like Botanigard and neem oil, and we've actually kicked them up a notch. We have actually made them more active. We have absolutely no idea why. So I think it if it's being used as a direct pesticide, it absolutely needs to be checked. You should not drink that stuff. It's not something you should definitely wear, and this needs to be worked out what kind of PPE you're going to need and all this stuff. I'm not it is potent, but I think overall it's mainly through indirect effects where it induces things in the plant that rather than killing directly. That's with the pathogens, it's probably with the mildew and whatnot, it's probably the hydrogen peroxide in the formulation that is doing the damage. But we also use hydrogen peroxide on our own skin, right, to kill microbes on our skin, and yeah, so it's kind of similar to that. But it's an area that definitely needs to be studied.
And then Ben Leachman is asking the next question. Good question. What is the carbon footprint of PAW versus the commercial production of commercial and fertilizer?
Okay, so there's a long. This is a. But think of the current Haber-Bosch process of synthetic fertilizer production. That has, from what I understand, and I'm not a chemist by any stretch of imagination, but from what I understand, what I've read is that they have basically optimized that to the very limit. They cannot make that more efficient. And right now, if you read that paper if you go here, we get into that in this paper here. You will definitely see that a significant portion of the greenhouse emissions are related to production of synthetic fertilizer. Now, if we can get renewable energy, and if that renewable energy is readily available and also at a price that people can pay, we can make this very, very sustainable. And if we can also stabilize the PAW so that we can produce it, store it, distribute it, or maybe develop units that are small enough and efficient enough. And what I want to say is, just think of computers, think of cell phones, think of solar panels, think of electric vehicles. These are all units of innovation that are just getting smarter and better and cheaper as we go along. We need some sort of federal level commitment to this and make this a priority so that we can so that growers can reap the benefits from it, because I think it has a lot of potential, and I think consumers would be very excited about this.
I agree, and that was fantastic, Christian. Thank you so much for joining us. And I know it's getting later where you're at.
Let's do it again tomorrow. We'll just
open.
repeat the whole thing tomorrow.
The door is open for future presentations, man. You're doing some amazing stuff.
Cool.
So we hope to have you back.
Absolutely.
Here
Anytime.
in a year or so.
Anytime.
All right, man. Thank you. Happy holidays.
Happy holidays to everybody. And again, look me up if you is there something with my name on? There we go. Feel free to reach out to me if you're interested in doing something in vineyards. If you can help us find some money, we would be more than interested in doing some work together. Okay.
All right.
Thank you very much.